Hello and welcome to Chatz, the television podcast, Season 9, Better Off Chatz. My name is Alan, and I'm going to say yes to my co-host getting a mouth, but mostly because I do, in fact, want to hear what he has to say. It's Magellan, everyone.
Hey, what's up, folks?
Nan, you deserve a mouth.
Thank you. This is really exciting. This is my first time
With a mouth?
with a mouth, yeah.
What are you going to do with your mouth first?
To record this podcast.
Okay, what are you going to do with your mouth
And
second?
Eat a sandwich.
What kind of sandwich?
Sausage.
Sausage. I feel like sausage.
No, like a Reuben.
Oh my god. What's the sweet one? No. Monte Cristo's the sweet one.
I don't know. I don't know if I've ever had a Monte Cristo.
We should get Monte Cristo's after this.
Okay.
That's
Let's do it.
that's the one true benefit to recording a podcast in person. There's no other benefit, but it's that you can get like sandwiches afterwards together as podcast buddies.
Yeah, we're also not recording this in person.
We're not? Oh, way to pull back the masquerade. Here we go.
Sorry.
Um,
Vampire the Masquerade bloodlines over here.
the Jedi. If you can't tell, we're a little hashtag random here at Chatsalon? Oh, God. Oh, no. We're a little random here at Chat Studios in Sunnyvale, California. Sunnyvale or Sunnydale? One of those is fake. One of those is real. I don't remember, and it doesn't matter. But anyways, hi, everybody. If you're new to Chatz, the television podcast, welcome. Superintendent Chalmers, welcome. This is Chatz Pod. It's a very strange, very fun podcast where my best friend Magellan and I talk about television shows, cult classic and otherwise, 2 episodes a week with a focus on comedy and criticism. My name, as you heard up top, is Alan Ibrahim. I use the they, them pronouns. I am a business student. I like TV shows, particularly science fiction stuff, detective stuff, dramas, sitcoms. I kind of like a lot of everything. I have, as my former coworker said, quote, too many hobbies. I'm into a lot of things, but kind of like, I'm sort of like a red mage, right? Where I'm into everything, but not good at anything. So that's what I got going on. Magellan, who are you? What's your deal?
Yeah, my name is Magellan Fluke. I, let's see, go by he, him pronouns. I, by day, am a high school history teacher. This is my 4th full year doing that. And then by night, I podcast or watch TV or play video games or do, whatever it is I'm
Study languages now.
In that week. Yeah, I've been watching Malcolm in the Middle, and one of the things that the thing with Hal is that every episode he kind of like gets super obsessed with one particular thing.
Yep.
And it's a trait of his that I find very relatable. So
nothing is better than hyperfixating, especially in this wacky time that we live in, man.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, what kind of TV do you like?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I like science fiction shows, like some of the ones we've covered. I enjoy comedies, like the one that we're talking about now. In fact, this is a sci-fi comedy, I guess you could say. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have a more interesting answer than that. I think sketch shows. Yeah,
I think you're similar to me that you tend to like story focused shows and also sitcoms, quite a bit. You cut your teeth on The Simpsons as a young lad, if I remember correctly.
Correct.
I also never liked the term "cut your teeth." It's useful, but it's so harsh. It's like when someone eats is about to finish a bag of chips, and then the other guy goes, "Yo, we're gonna kill that," and I'm like, "Why must I kill? Why must I kill? I want to be a pacifist." No. Anyways, yeah, if you have been sticking around, you'll know that this is Chatz Season 9. We've been doing this for about 5 years now. Gonna hit 5 years in December, at least based on when we've been releasing shows. And previously, we have recorded podcast seasons about the TV shows Farscape, Freaks and Geeks, Avatar: The Last Airbender, The Newsroom, Pushing Daisies, Babylon 5, The Prisoner, Pride and Prejudice, Roots, and HBO's John Adams. And that brings us here today to Season 9, Better Off Chatz. Better Off Chatz is going to be a podcast where we watch 2 episodes of the 2009 sitcom Better Off Ted. So we're getting right into it. We have already watched the pilot. We're going to be discussing it again, but because not everybody here is a patron. If you don't know, we actually have a Patreon where if you like what we do here on Chatz, you can hear more of us every freaking week with a huge backlog going over a year now. That can be found at patreon.com/chatspod. And we recently watched a slew of 2009 sitcoms, including Better Off Ted. And it was through that we decided it was time to go deep on this kooky, spooky show.
Mm-hmm.
John, do you want to give people the rundown on Better Off Ted?
Yeah, so for folks who haven't seen the show before, in fact, I think the description that we have for the pilot episode is a good jumping off point, and then I can kind of elaborate from there. But Better Off Ted is a canceled before its time 2-season sitcom that began airing in March of 2009. And again, here's the description of the pilot episode, which says, Ted Crisp is the head of research and development at Viridian Dynamics, a top-line corporation striving to make it to the top. Ted has an uneasy friendship with his boss, Veronica Palmer. She's always wanting something from him to add to the business, from biowarfare pumpkins to uncomfortable leather chairs. Dr. Lem Hewitt and Dr. Phil Myman are two research analysts that work in Ted's group and are always competing against one another to get ahead, that's not 100% accurate.
Also not necessarily true yet.
Where is this coming from, this summary?
I forget where this, I think this first one's from IMDb. The second one I wrote.
Okay, all right. Linda Zwardling is a young intern. I didn't know she's an intern and test consultant to office test the various experiments the lab puts out. Ted is a recent divorcee raising a 10-year-old daughter named Rose after his wife left him to find herself as well as to, quote, save the world. Ted's latest assignments involves recruiting Phil to be cryogenically frozen, so this is the plot of the first episode, as a public relations experiment for the company's research purposes. So that gives you kind of a sense of who the different characters are. I would say the thing about Better Off Ted is I find that not a lot of people talk about it, in part because the title just sucks.
It's a terrible title, yeah.
It's not a good title. It's kind of hard to explain to somebody what the show is without just sitting them down and having them watch an episode. Something like 30 Rock you could easily pitch as like, oh my God, Tina Fey, it's a show where they're making a sketch show. And you're like, cool, all right. But this, it's like they work at a company and they make crazy stuff sometimes, which doesn't sound like the sexiest pitch, I don't think, but ends up being a pretty sharp and fun satire of corporate speak, corporate life, all of those things, and also has some elements of sci-fi and kind of off the wall stuff that's pretty fun too.
For sure, yeah. The show is coming at us from Victor and Michael Fresco, who are the primary showrunners on this series, writer and director in that order. I don't know exactly what they've worked on besides this. I hadn't heard of their names in the sort of TV landscape with my background, at least. I don't know. I think at least one of them worked on Andy Richter Controls the Universe, which I've heard from you is a very strange show.
It's fun. I really like that show a lot.
Yeah, very creative, very well regarded in the sort of cult classic landscape. So they've done like producing and directing on stuff like that. But yeah, I imagine that the pitch had to be something along the lines of like, what is a mega? What does it look like on the inside of a mega corporation? And can we make that funny? Can we make that interesting and engaging?
Yeah, and
interestingly,
I've read...
yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Interestingly enough, the origin section of the Wikipedia page for this show says that Victor Fresco, the show's creator, cited his being a parent as inspiration for the show. In an interview with NPR, he discussed how having a kid piqued his interest to develop a show about the disconnect between a person's public and personal lives, such as how parents teach their kids to be moral, yet work for giant corporations. We definitely see that in this first episode with Ted and his daughter Rose, and how he's like, you need to be a good person, but I'm not going to be a good person, but you need to. I don't know how to show you that,
Yeah.
But I'm really enjoying it. Yeah, I'm excited to talk about it. It's one of those series that I've kind of known about for a long time. I never watched this one when it came out. Again, that's something I mentioned on the Pilot Chats episode over on our Patreon. But I didn't know what to expect. And working myself at an office right now and also being a business student, I see a ton of the stuff in my studies and in my day-to-day work life in this show. Honestly, more than I care to admit sometimes, but I'll be bringing that stuff up occasionally on the show just because, this was 10 years ago, but there definitely is still that aspect of like underlying corporate greed that is honestly very funny. Like, I appreciate that this is a sitcom and not like a drama. Like, this as a drama would be so strange and just sad, because you have to laugh at yourself a little bit when this is your day-to-day life, I think. So I think the sitcom format works really, really well for it. You've watched a little bit more of the show in the past, is that correct?
Yeah, a few years ago I watched the whole thing, and I'm trying to remember, probably like 5-6 years ago at this point.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you have a familiarity with the series at least.
Mm-hmm.
We can start by talking about the pilot, which is called Pilot. As I mentioned before, it was written by Victor Fresco, directed by Michael Fresco, and it originally aired March 18th, 2009. John, it sounds like you already read the summary, so I'm just going to go ahead and ask, what did you think on this rewatch, actually, of the Better Off Ted pilot?
Yeah, so I think we said a few things about it when we piloted it over at our Patreon. I think one of the main points that we had is just how charming the show is and how like immediately it catches your interest and gets you invested in the show through the snappiness of the dialogue and just the actors being very winsome, and then the cinematography. Like the way that opening sequence just, I think, sells the show really well, where you see Ted kind of sitting behind his desk, and then the camera keeps swooping up to him as he gives his monologue, and there's something about that camera movement that captures everything about the show, where it's kind of like shot like an infomercial at times, and the music sounds like elevator music, and
Yes.
like everything about it is this sort of like jaunty critique of corporate-y stuff that ends up being really fun. And I definitely felt that the second time too.
Yeah, it's super duper sharp, like to the point where we try to take some light notes on the episode to help guide the discussion, and like 90% of my notes, especially on this rewatch, were just quotes of really good jokes. It's the kind of show that you just like it expects your attention because everything everyone is saying is very funny and very charming. But what I think it succeeds at, especially in the second episode, which we'll get to, is that it's still telling a story. It's still developing characters and setting up some subtle world building here and there about the Vernian Dynamics office environment and like location. I really like the setting of this like all wood, office space, and then they have like their downstairs where all the testing is, and the labs that are like super sterile. Like, it's just it's a really well dressed, good accoutrements kind of show. Bolstered by a very strong cast of mostly people who I wasn't familiar with previously. I mean, we have Jay Harrington as Ted Crisp, who I've literally never heard of before this show. And he's really impressive.
I don't know that I've seen him in anything else.
Yeah, I don't know what else he's actually been in. It says he's in here something called Summerland, which was another like sitcom, I think, from that same a little earlier. He's done a lot of TV, it looks like. And he's from Massachusetts. Look at that. Good for him. The most famous person I think in the main cast is Portia de Rossi as Veronica Palmer. I obviously know her as Ellen DeGeneres' wife, and also if you ever like read about her, she's had a really fascinating background, like when she was a model before marrying Ellen. And like coming out as gay in the early 2000s, in the 90s, I think even she might have come out earlier. Like that in the modeling world was super stressful for her, and very brave of her to like come out at the time. But she's now she's a businesswoman actually.
Well, and also was Lindsay Bluth on Arrested Development.
Oh, of course, yes, iconic role. Yes, that's true.
Which is so she's like at this point probably the biggest name on the cast.
Yeah. Without a doubt.
Because that show ended in like 2006, I think, or something like that. So she's like still a big name, I think, at this point.
Right. She's and again, she's definitely the biggest of the main cast that I know of. Like the people who play Linda and Phil and Lem, I've literally never seen any of them. It's kind of refreshing. I think I always I watched the 1990s Sleepy Hollow movie yesterday. And that movie really like gets in the way of its own plot by filling it with like famous British and American actors. That you're like, oh, that's just Dumbledore. I don't care what like 1700s wig you put on him. That is Dumbledore though, and that is Johnny Depp trying to be the main guy or whatever. It's it's like kind of very jarring how, you know, choosing to cast famous actors can bring a lot of clout to your show, but also like make it forgettable. I wonder if that's part of actually why the show didn't succeed. It seems like a classic case from my little bit of reading of low ratings, but you know, were those low ratings due to like a lot of things, right? The difficult to explain premise, maybe a lack of serialization,
who knows what day it was on or what it came on after.
Yeah, exactly.
It also started in the mid-season in March, which is rough.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the thing that, you know, more so than why wasn't it successful in the beginning that I wonder about is like, it has a cult status now, but a cult status that is like more legitimately cult, I think, than some other things. Like Freaks and Geeks we've covered before. And Freaks and Geeks, like, if you mentioned it, people have heard about it, or you could pitch it as like, yeah, Jason Segel, James Franco, oh my god, freaking
right. It's
whatever,
so cool to see
Linda
a young
Cardellini, like all these people were on it. Seth Rogen was in it. But this show, it's like, you know, it doesn't necessarily have that much kind of cult clout because there aren't huge names except for Portia de Rossi, who's great, and I think she's really, really great in it. But like, also her character is kind of close to Lindsay Bluth.
Yes, the like shrewd, ignorant businesswoman who's just like really mean but doesn't understand why.
Yeah, and she's like more put together and on top of things than Lindsay, who is like supposed to be a mess.
Yeah,
But still, it definitely seems like it was a part that was like written for her. You know, to have her be like the one name that was on the show.
I think it actually was. I remember reading in the production section also that like she was one of the people who they were like, yes, we wrote this role for her. Fresco was convinced that Portia de Rossi was perfect for the role. I actually really like this quote from Victor Fresco about why the show was canceled. If you don't mind, I'll give this a little read. He says, I think that not enough people knew about it. It wasn't like we had a lot of people watching and they didn't come back to it. If anything, I think we were building very slowly, but to me, the way the TV works is you spend a lot of money on advertising and promoting, or you have to let a show stay someplace for a long period of time and an audience will slowly come to it. And I don't think we got either of those things. So, you know, not enough time to build the audience and not enough promotion to start with an audience.
And it seems like the kind of show that if now it was like a Netflix original or something, where it just was on the front page of everybody's thing and everyone was like, okay, I'll give it an episode, it would probably be huge. But it just, I don't know,
wrong place, wrong time.
Wrong place, wrong time. Yeah.
I actually, like, we'll obviously get back to this when we finish the series, but the final 2 episodes were never aired. They're only available like on Hulu and on streaming platforms in the DVDs, obviously, because in 2010, when they were going to air them, it was at the same time as the 2010 NBA Finals. And the only way they would air was if they didn't get a 7th game in the final series. And because they did, they were like, all right, NBA Finals wins. You guys don't get to ever air your last 2 episodes. So they're like, well, the fact that they... Yeah, speaking of like unfortunate time slots, there you go. It's the paper. Right. But this episode, it's fun. It's really fun. I think that it has like a high energy vibe. Like you said, that elevator music gives it this energy of like a corporate promotional video or something.
Yeah, like a training video or kind of something like that.
Yeah, Ted looking directly at camera, I think, is often very good. And Veronica just walking in and being like, Ted, we need a mouse that can stand temperatures up to 195 degrees. We can do that. Yeah. It's just a lot of clever people doing a lot of clever things. I mean, Ted and Veronica are like they are like intellectually equals in a lot of ways. I think the show gets across really well this idea that even these like really rich people who are high up in a company, that doesn't make them smart, and it doesn't make them know what their products actually do or what the sort of implications of those products are. It's just like, I know that the higher ups need pumpkins that explode and you have to give it to me. I don't care about what they're being used for. Just Yeah. It's
It's really I'm curious to see how the show develops its satire, because I think that's a place where the sort of like charming thing could get a little muddy. Like you think about a show like Veep or something
yeah.
where that's very biting satire. You're not ever supposed to like any of the characters. You're supposed to always know that they're being self-centered or rude or manipulative or whatever, right? But with Better Off Ted, it the show wants you to like everybody almost in like a Parks and Rec way,
Yeah.
where
This is
you're
a fun
supposed to have
cast.
right, you're supposed to have a fondness for all the characters. And I'm not sure yet if that like works to the show's benefit or not, because it definitely feels like we talked about this when we piloted it, but it definitely feels like an intentional choice about how Ted is characterized, that he's your stereotypical like, I can get anybody to do anything, I'm a master manipulator, I can sell this chair that is incredibly uncomfortable, except he's not an asshole.
Yeah.
And he's not like a narcissist, at least in an obvious way. He's just an empty suit who will do the job because it's his job, and he's like totally fine with it. Like in the scene like you're talking about where they're talking about the pumpkins and how to turn the pumpkins into chemical weapons, and the scientist guy is gleefully explaining how they can turn them into mold bombs
Yeah.
to turn soldiers into mold. The most that you get out of Ted is him being like, ew, ugh, gross. Okay, let's put you on this project. And you know that with a snap of his fingers, he can make mold bombs happen. And he's like unfazed by that.
Right. Yeah. That ability to like exactly what they said in the production thing, right? Like you can have a moral compass, but then put it aside to do your job is crucial to why he's so successful. They actually say at the beginning he's only been at the company for 3 years, and he just got the promotion to his current role very recently. So like he's clearly been on the up and up for a while. It's not like he's stagnating or anything like that. I think.
Yeah, and oh, go ahead.
I just was gonna say I think that Rose, his daughter, does a lot in this pilot in terms of making us like him, because you see this like person that is his child, and I'm such a sucker for single dads. Honestly, like I always find that like very charming the way they choose to portray single dads, especially in sitcoms. But like he has a daughter who's like, yeah, you can't freeze your coworker. I don't care if it's like good for business or he's gonna be part of a cool experiment. He's a person, and you need to remember that. So, I think that works a lot. I actually like missed her in the second episode because she wasn't really.
Yeah. I thought it was going to be a thing where she'd be in every single one. The third episode is like bring your daughter to work day, I think. So we'll see more of her.
Thank goodness.
But yeah, she was very precocious.
Yes.
All of her lines were like adult character lines, which is fine.
Yeah.
Because it ended up being cute. Like when he's like, "Did you do your math homework?" She says, "Yes." He says 6 times 8, and she says, "Yes, that was one of them."
That was one of them. Yes.
Which, like, I don't think a kid would ever be quite that witty.
Absolutely not
in that way, but it was amusing. So I like Rose, and I'm curious to see more of her. The thing that I was like kind of unsure about was the setup for why he's a single dad, which is the whole thing. He tells you into camera, he's like, yeah, her mom left to save the world. Ugh,
yeah, what?
Like, good luck to the world or whatever. And it's like, what is that? What did you make of that moment?
I mean, I don't know how silly the show is prepared to get, but I was like, if she's a literal superhero, then the show owns. Like if she's Superwoman or Stargirl or whatever, I'm super down for that. But if it's more like, oh, she's a doctor and she works for the Peace Corps, I would totally understand that also. I don't know. I'm kind of excited to find out what that means. But that's a really good example of like, even in a sitcom, you can write backstory and then pull it out of your pocket when you want to later. Which I think is like one of the most clever things about this series is that it builds a continuity out of like off the cuff lines that you don't think are important. Like you could make a note of that, and then maybe whenever we see that in the future, like what that means again, you're like, oh, they said that in the first episode. Yeah. They said like mom's out there saving the world. Now we'll find out what that means. Or like Linda's writing a children's book in the off time at work.
Yeah, it just seems like they're setting it up to like they're making fun of like humanitarian type people in this sort of like, oh, you hippies, oh, you granola munchin, like you're gonna go to Africa or whatever people. I don't know, that was a weird note, and I'm curious to see where that goes.
Yeah, like what do the characters on this show view? How do they view like other occupations and stuff? We don't really see a lot of that.
Right, and is that a moment that reflects poorly on Ted, and we're going to see him change on that, or is that the voice of the show being like, so foolish to go try to save the world?
Yeah,
you selfish lady.
We're doing important stuff here.
Yeah,
like making pumpkin grenades. One of the aspects of office culture that I don't think they get into in this one, but I kind of wish they do, because like within these two, we see testers, we see scientists, we see marketing people, R&D people, but we don't see like janitorial staff. We only see like upper management. So it kind of ignores the fact that like an office functions almost entirely on like the work of people like IT and people in custodial services. So like I'm rewatching like scenes of the episode, and I don't like see. In my workplace, like we have a very close relationship with our cleaning staff because, I mean, there's a pandemic right now, so we have to. But like those people are around in any average office. The show kind of is like
we do see those two guys, those two maintenance guys or whatever, who have to move Phil's cryogenic pod and then like unplug it by accident.
Oh, sure. And the guy's like, "Yeah, I can talk."
yeah, but that's the closest we get. We don't see them interact with like the main characters.
Yeah,
I think that might happen later if I'm remembering things correctly, but we'll see.
I believe it. They have a lot of room. Like an office environment's just there's a reason that there's like 1,000 office sitcoms now. It's just a really open environment for you to plug in and take out characters.
Right.
Definitely was a big fan. Speaking of like side characters, of Dr. Bamba. Who I love. It's nice to see the Middle Eastern representation, especially in a sitcom in 2009, but also just his like joy in being able to create a weapon is so like, I don't know if there's something, if you want to like get nitpicky or like kind of like criticize the show, that like you give the guy with the funny accent the like just desire for destruction, like that kind of thing.
Yeah,
but I think
and also the idea of like all of the representation of I don't know, like him being a scientist doesn't feel like we're breaking some sort of boundary of representation of people who are Middle Eastern or Arabic on TV. Like doctors and scientists I feel like tend to be more racially diverse on TV as
True.
It is.
And he's just the like you can also just say it's a mad scientist trope, like it doesn't have to be like a deaf man or whatever. He's excited to see Phil's eyes potentially pop at 20 degrees, and then they don't. You get to that scene where they're all like, I think this show has a really great library of gasps. Especially I noticed like once if we're jumping around, but like when Phil gets unfrozen and like every time he does his scream, there's like a stock noise of someone going, like you think they would get used to it by now after like the 100th time.
Yeah.
I want to jump around to a couple of like hard laughs that I had in this first episode. We have Phil and Lem, who are just impossibly cute and my favorite headcanon couple in the show. Certainly better than Ted and Linda, but I have things to say about that relationship. But they're talking in one of their first scenes about how they have fought previously, fought other people even. They're talking about sandwiches. And I think Lem brings up his mom, and he delivers this line so fantastically. He's like, "She once killed a bat with a People magazine." Like he says it like it's a poem. It's so good.
That's funny.
A lot of times the lines don't even have to be funny on paper, but it's just like the way that they deliver them. Like I wonder if that was a direction of like say this with like a rhythm to it, or if it just came out really well. But I got a hard laugh out of that.
That's pretty great, yeah.
And then Linda talking about how like the chairs and the leather makes people uncomfortable, so that makes them more productive, was one of those like sad laughs for me where I was like, that's really funny and probably true somewhere in some time.
Yeah, there are a few. I mean, I think some of the sharpest moments of satire in this particular episode are those jokes, like the chair that people are more productive because they're uncomfortable, but then they scream and run away from it, or like how the company moved the toilet paper further away from the toilet so that people can't reach it.
Just bring it
they
with
don't
you.
stay in the bathroom as long. Or the water fountain that when you swipe your hand, as soon as you dip down to drink the water, it's already gone.
Yeah.
That all felt like, okay, this is the best of what this show can offer, I think, in terms of making fun of corporate culture.
Yeah, I think too, like, you can do that plenty, especially in the early parts of an episode before the plot has to start. You can just kind of like drop those as much as you want, but then it comes down to like the characters and the line delivery stuff later, because once we're talking about Veronica's talking to Ted about I'm trying to remember talking about the pumpkins, and he's like or she's like, oh well, finally the pumpkin gets to do something besides Halloween, and then there's like a hard like 3-second beat, and then he's like, pie. She's like,
Well, no, she says.
Or no, it's the other way around. Yes, you're right.
Because what's so great about that moment is it tells you everything you need to know about Veronica and Ted.
Yeah.
Where like Veronica just will not let the conversation end without having the last word and winning. And then his response is to be like, yeah, Halloween and pie. Like, you're right, boss. He just totally rolls over and lets her win. And Portia de Rossi really, really kills that line delivery where she kind of like pauses and then almost looks angry or like she's gonna shout at him, and then just says the word pie. Is really, really well done.
Yeah. I feel like all the best Veronica jokes are the ones that portray her as like deeply, deeply neurotic and wants people to like the fact that she invents an award in the second episode and then is like, but I want it. So good.
And she just has a lot of great lines that are like envelope pushing, but because she's the one that's saying them, they're okay. Like when she's like, oh, this, I don't know, she's complaining about something, and then Ted is like, what's the issue? And she's like, it's not Katrina, but it is a problem.
Ooh.
And it's like no other character could say that but her.
Absolutely not. Yeah.
And then she also is the best vehicle for the satire that the show's trying to do. And she has lines like where she says, she's like, oh, what's that thing? Underlings have it. Oh, loyalty. And the funny line, but also like kind of ironic too, because Veronica's whole character is her complete loyalty to the company.
Yes.
Yeah. And she is their underling, like whoever the they is that she keeps talking about. She just does what they ask her to without question. So there's this irony to her sort of feeling like she's above it all and above everybody else, but she's as much a part of the machine and the system as they are.
Exactly. She's able to, speaking of like lines that she's able to deliver that would like terrify me otherwise. This one's not like worrisome, but it's like when Phil comes in and he's like, Ted, there's a problem. Veronica, it's not a problem. And then she's like, Phil, go away. I'm here to talk about you, not to you. And that's just one of those things that like, if my boss ever said that in a meeting or something, and they're like, Alan, please leave, like we're talking about you, but you can't be here, I would die on the spot. I would instantly perish. There's no way that's good.
Yeah.
And in this case, it's her being like, can you please get your employee to be frozen for a year or whatever, 10 years. Mm-hmm. No, it's a year. Because I remember thinking like, this is not so long that it would like change his life, but it's definitely long enough that it would like be ridiculous.
Yeah, it's the perfect level of stakes for this show, where it's not like they're freezing him until 2065 or whatever.
Yeah,
it's like just a year. Yeah, and then that creates. This gets explored more in the second episode, but that ends up creating a really fun dynamic between Phil and Lem, where Lem is just like pissed at him and is so petty about it. And he has this great line where he says, I'll just stand perfectly still so I don't accidentally go on living my life without you, moron. So
and he says,
that was really fun.
Mrs. Moron, and he's like, at least I have a Mrs. Moron.
Yeah, that whole exchange was great. And Phil being so oblivious to the fact that his wife despises him.
She hates him.
Yeah.
I have a line about that from the second episode, but I want to get there. Yeah. There's a lot of good. I think Phil and Lem are honestly going to be like my two favorites in this series, just because they're so charming with each other, and they have so much
Mhm.
like genuine affection for each other and being around, and
Mhm.
they also work well together. So like the company will support them
Mhm.
hanging out, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
What did you think about the Linda stuff in this episode? Because I know I didn't love it the first time I watched it.
I think this second time around that I was watching, I was able to distinguish between like Linda as a character and Linda in the Linda Ted pairing
Right.
as like two different things that I feel very differently about, because Linda as a character, I think makes total sense. You're saying like, okay, you've got Ted, who's just the company man. He just does what the company wants him to. He's very successful. He's doing a great job. You've got Phil and Lem, who are kind of like wacky side guys who just are happy to live their little life in their laboratory, and they're kind of insulated from the corporateness of it all. And so then you need a character like Linda, who is like, I hate it here. This is awful. This is crushing my soul. I want to rebel and resist and get out of here. And so all this stuff with that about like how she's stealing creamer and how she's secretly writing a children's book, like I really like that stuff. And I think it makes sense for the ensemble that she's there. And then I think the stuff they spend half of her time, driving home how much she's really attracted to Ted and wants to like have sex with Ted or whatever. And it's like, this is a waste. Their chemistry only comes from the fact that they are both two very charismatic people who have chemistry with everyone,
Yes.
And so I don't particularly look at them and think like, oh yes, this is the romance that's going to anchor this show.
Yeah, it's like she's looking for support in this environment. I think Linda is like the closest to like how I feel often, and I think most like Americans these days feel in oppressive office environments, is like anything I can do, anything I can take. When the creamer example is perfect. I'm going to take it. So like I agree that like the thing that attracts her to him is just that he's nice to her and like listens to her, whereas everybody else kind of like treats her like a number. Because the moment that like sparks it for them is when Phil is being frozen and about to hit 20, and she turns to him and she says, "This is normal. Every office does this, right?" And then he's like, yeah, absolutely. Like, of course they do. Like, he's not necessarily a rebel, but he understands how to like appease a rebellious person is by like feeding into that and telling them that they're right to be worried. So he holds her hand, and then for the rest of the episode, she's like, "So you held my hand. Are we gonna have an office affair or what?" And he has these qualms about having another one because he previously had a really spontaneous one with Veronica.
Right, and I don't know. I'm sort of torn about like. Because I think I've talked in previous chat seasons before about how when a show makes you wait for the romance to happen, it's kind of like, why are you, the will they won't they thing is just so annoying.
Uh-huh.
But then this show, there's like no will they won't they at all. It's just sort of like, hey, they both want to have sex with each other, but they can't. Okay. Anyway.
Yeah.
Moving on.
I wrote it in my notes as a when will they. Because you kind of know what's going to happen at this point. There's no reason not to.
Which ends up, I think, also making it kind of boring.
Mm-hmm.
But the twist here that you're setting up, where it turns out that Ted and Veronica just had sex one time, is really funny.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a great reveal. And it's bold to put it in the first episode. I think something that you can say for Better Off Ted is that it's a show that like isn't afraid to do whatever it feels like. And this is definitely one of those moments where it's like, we're just going to do this because we don't care. Like, we feel like doing this.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And like speaking of Veronica being a person that's desperate for like validation and attention, the whole reason that she sleeps with Ted in his office is because they're talking. She's like, "Do I sound vulnerable?" And he's like, "No, that's not what vulnerable is like." And then she's like, "Okay." So, and then it's just a beat, and then they have like woken up after doing the nasty.
Yeah.
It's just him being like, "Yeah, this is what my boss wants." I don't think he feels any attraction to her. I think you could almost make a read of like, not Ted as like asexual, because he definitely has like a physical attraction to Linda, but and he is sexually active, so who's to say? But just like His sexuality is defined by like what other people want of him, not what he wants very often. Does that make sense?
Correct. Yeah, definitely. It's just another example of like he isn't thinking for himself
Yes.
in this environment. And it's true with Veronica, it's true with Linda, it's true with Phil until his daughter is like, dude, what the hell are you doing?
Yeah.
Like, do the right thing.
Do adults even know the difference between right and wrong? He's like, I don't know.
Yeah. But his whole thing about like, I'm only allowed to have one office affair, otherwise people will think I'm sleeping around, is like, it doesn't work like that, Ted. There are no rules. There's no law or whatever that you have to follow. It's not like suddenly people are going to change their perception of you, but he just has this rigid sense of like, this is what I'm allowed to do. This is what I'm supposed to do.
Right.
And if I deviate from that, even if I want to, that's no good. And he like doesn't question that. He doesn't really seem to mind it either. He's like not upset about it when he's talking to Linda. He's like, yeah, you know, it is what it is.
Like he just doesn't feel like he has control over his own life. I think I would really love it if his arc ended up being him learning to take control a little bit, or maybe like learning to rebel. Who's to say where the show goes, especially in its second season? I'm like, no idea where that can go. But I just imagine like this show just can't put him in this position forever, right? He has to like question his loyalties at some point. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of what they're giving us, the sort of like, here's the normal world, here's the everyday.
Yeah.
And then he's going to grow out of this, I would assume. And the part of the reason I think that is, again, because the show like wants us to like him so much.
Right.
He must be, you know, redeemed and become a real person at some point, I would assume.
Beyond just with his daughter.
Right.
Yeah, I think that is potentially interesting. My last thing about Phil, about Ted and Linda. Sorry, I'm still rewatching. I forgot that the last shot of the first episode is Phil still screaming, but like shrugging, like I don't know why I'm screaming. So good.
Yeah.
No, it's just, it almost feels like. Have you ever seen the movie Network, Magellan?
I've not seen Network, no.
So it's been a while. It's probably been like 10 years since I've seen it. But one of the things I remember not liking in that movie initially was that it, without going too into like the plot of Network, it's a really good movie and people should watch it. It's probably Sidney Lumet's one of his like top 3 movies. But it has this like romance at the center of it that feels really fake, and it's like super dull and like gets in the way of all of the interesting social commentary of the film, until you realize that it's these like 2 rich corporate people who are like acting out what a corporate romance is supposed to look like. And as soon as you think about it like that, it sort of reframes all of the romance in the movie. And I kind of feel like Ted and Linda are like doing that, where it doesn't feel realistic that she's just like, man, I just really want to sleep with you. And he's like, I can't. And she's like, please. And he's like, okay, maybe I'll think about it. Like, just, it seems so clean. Almost like sanitized, you know, especially in that second episode
like
where she's just
you're
like,
saying that maybe they're trying to satirize office romance.
Precisely. Yes.
Extent.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because, you know, we're both good looking. We're both successful. Why not? Like, this just seems like a fun thing to do for them. There's no romance involved beyond that. But I'm curious where that goes to.
Yeah.
But anyways, in this first episode, Phil gets out. They knock over his cryo freezing tube. So he gets out. Now he screams occasionally every once in a while. He sounds like a weird duck. I think... What is it in the second episode? Lem is like, you keep saying like barg or something. He's like, I'm not saying that. I'm just screaming. God, like, I'm not saying a word, you weirdo. My last thing is that we didn't talk about it much, but it seems like each episode of the show is going to open on these commercials for Viridian Dynamics, which I'm probably going to drop in this episode. But I really like those. I think they're like astonishingly well made in terms of looking like corporate shill. Just gross, like, hey, it's Viridian Dynamics, you love us,
all these random stock clips and photos and stuff.
Yeah, here's like grass being cut, and here's a cow, and they're like, and they actually like foreshadow in this one, they're like, but we make power, and we make food and all this stuff. Cows, we don't make that. And then literally the second episode is them being like, but what if we made cow meat?
Yeah.
So I'm kind of curious, like how much they're we were talking about this before the podcast, but like how much are they going to use those to like foreshadow or like set up what the episode is about?
Yeah.
Because in these ones, it just seems like in this first one, it's like Variant Dynamics, we're ubiquitous, we're everywhere, we can do anything. And then in the second, even like we do military stuff, that's the stinger. And then in the second one, it's like, hey, we make food. That's great. But yeah, I just wanted to shout those out because they're really, really well done. I think if I've seen anything of this show, I've seen some of those commercials and people like referencing Viridian Dynamics as like a good, funny, evil corporation. But
yeah,
that's what I got. Majel, do you have any stray notes about this first episode?
There was just one line that I didn't mention that I thought was funny, which is when Ted's trying to like comfort Phil and say like, you don't have to get frozen. He says they can't force employees to participate in human experiments. They lost that court case. He like whispers it a little bit at the end. It was just a really, really good delivery. So lots of fun lines like that.
There is something, they're talking about moving Phil, and they're like, oh, they're moving him tomorrow. Oh, where? The basement. Although there has been talk of India. Like we could just outsource him if we need to. We could just toss him across the world, or we could put him downstairs. Yeah, it's very funny stuff. And then I also wrote that I just want to see more Rose, but I think, yeah, like you said, the third episode is the Rose hour. Cool. Well, if you're down, Magellan, I think we should take it to our first musical break, and we'll be right back to discuss Heroes, not the show, the episode. Hey everyone, just popping in here before the actual musical break to read our very first Better Off Chatz email. Usually we do an email segment in the middle of the episode discussions in case we receive emails between episodes. Get it? That's kind of cute. I didn't even think about that until now. You can send emails, questions, comments, concerns, and if you want to have them read, specify that or specify otherwise, and send those to chatspod@gmail.com, which we shout out again at the end of the episode. This email this week comes in from our buddy Ryan from the Spit and Polish Presents podcast. Ryan, for those who don't know, is a longtime friend of the podcast, a good pal from the land down under, and he is looking like he's a fan of Better Off Ted. He opens his email, hello chats. I'm glad to hear you're going to take a look at Better Off Ted, a show I haven't seen since it aired late night on Australian TV once in a blue moon. I remember trying to stay up late on school nights trying to catch episodes of Scrubs, and then one night Scrubs wasn't on and was replaced with Better Off Ted, and I was pleasantly surprised by how good it was. It'll be good to give it a revisit along with your podcasting on it to see if it holds up to my late night memories of it. Yeah, I think that's often like the case with these sort of like B tier or more obscure sitcoms is like, oh, I was watching something else and this just happened to be on. And like that is why airtime matters so much. That's why we're always talking about shows getting canceled because they aired at a weird time is because of stuff like that. But that's very cool that you've seen some of the show before, and I'm really happy you're back on the pod. There's a podcast I listen to which may be of interest called Keiko's Industries, which is majorly inspired by Better Off Ted, and it deals with the new head of a company that does evil better. That's Keiko's, Kakos Industries. I should look into that. I'm definitely into evil corporate stuff, especially from a comedic angle and a strange sci-fi angle. That's why I'm enjoying Better Off Ted primarily. And, Welcome to Night Vale, not so much corporate, but more like rural radio. I like that sort of like role-playing, the vibe of something that we're all used to otherwise. It's also why I've really been enjoying the video game Control, which I shouted out on the Pilot Chats episode, and I might shout out again. It's just my cultural touchstone for the moment, similar to Better Off Ted. And Ryan concludes, also in my brain, Better Off Ted would pair so beautifully with the series Reaper, which I would recommend if you have not seen it, and if not, just for Ray Wise being Satan, but also because it was a really great show. Kind regards, Ryan. I also should probably check out Reaper. That sounds pretty neat. I haven't seen Ray Wise in anything in a long time. I forget what I've seen him in, and I'm sorry for having a small brain, but I'm recording this probably a couple hours before it goes up. So, oops. Again, yeah, thank you so much, Ryan, for your email. We love getting emails. That's chatspot@gmail.com. If you want to have yours read, hopefully at some point I'll be able to get Magellan in if this isn't so last minute like this one. But yeah, I will take it back to the actual musical break, and then we will be back to discuss Heroes.
Viridian Dynamics. We're the future of food. Developing the next generation of food and food-like products. Tomatoes, the size of this baby. Lemon-flavored fish. Chickens that lay 16 eggs a day, which is a lot for a chicken. Organic vegetables, chock full of antidepressants. At Viridian Dynamics, we can even make radishes so spicy that people can't eat them, but we're not, because people can't eat them. Viridian Dynamics. Food. Yum.
Welcome back to Better Off Chats. The second episode we watched this week was Better Off Ted Season 1, Episode 2, Heroes. It was written by show creator Victor Fresco, directed by perhaps the brother. Is this right?
I believe they're brothers.
Michael Fresco. Originally aired March 25th, 2009. Alan, what happened in this episode of Better Off Ted?
I'm so glad you asked that. Thank you, first of all. Thank you for asking.
You're welcome.
In this episode, while Phil and Lem work in the lab to create beef without cows, Veronica takes steps to ensure that Phil won't sue the company for his botched freezing. She invents the Trailblazer of the Year award for Phil, but wants it for herself. The fame goes to Phil's head, and this causes a rift in his and Lem's relationship. Ted is tasked with keeping them together long enough to finish the beef project, but the two have a falling out. When Ted threatens to split them up once and for all, the scientists reconcile, creating a mechanism to massage the meat blob and allow it to grow.
Alan, I just realized something.
We're not recording.
No. We are.
Okay. What's up?
I just realized that in this episode, Phil and Lem have beef.
Ah!
You know, they're also trying to make beef.
And they're also trying to have a beef baby.
Beef baby, yeah.
Damn, I really peaked the mic at that laugh. I'm sorry to the listener. I'll fix that.
I really peaked in my comedy career.
You super did. It's only downhill from here, baby.
Yeah, it's okay. What did you think of Heroes?
I liked it. I had a fun time. I thought this episode was actually funnier than the first one. Am I allowed to say that?
Whoa.
Okay, I'm not allowed to say that. I'll edit it.
No, that's fine.
Okay, it's fine, I guess.
Form an opinion on that particular point.
Yeah, I thought it was even more laugh a minute. Definitely on my first watch, I was like, I don't get the point of this episode. But Ted neatly explains it to us in like almost a send up of the classic like sitcom protagonist ends the episode by being like, the moral of the story is. Yeah. Because what he says is like, heroes are what you make of it, and we can all be heroes, and we are heroes. But I think of this episode as being about like, you know, obviously Phil and Lem and their meat blob son and how difficult being a parent can be in that way where you're trying to take care of this person, but you have your way and they have their way and there's conflict. Mm-hmm. I think it's about getting manipulated and kind of in terms of the corporate satire, just the hollowness of like certain types of promotions and side promotions where people can get a new title, but it doesn't mean anything except more work, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I think this episode's got a good amount of stuff going on. Yeah, I liked it. What about you?
I liked it too. No. I liked it too. I was reflecting both times that I watched it on the fact that it really just felt like an extension of the first episode in a lot of ways. I'm wondering kind of how standalone future episodes of Better Off Ted are going to be, because this one literally like flashed back to parts from the first episode at times, in a way that like, I don't know. Actually, it felt very Arrested Development, because I think Arrested Development does that, right?
Yes, it flashes back to its own episode, yeah.
Yeah, so maybe that's where they're getting that from, but something about it felt kind of off in this show for some reason. I don't know. But also it was cool to see that there's so much kind of close continuity going on. But it also, this episode was trying to function as like a second pilot, I think, to catch people who had heard about the show or were tuning in this time and and hadn't seen the first episode, and so it just had that kind of vibe of it was trying to do a few different things at once, and so the episode itself ended up feeling a little light, I think, as a result, which is fine because it's a light show. But if I had any reservations about it, it was that. But overall, I thought it was pretty funny and enjoyed it too.
It comes close to you realizing that Phil and Lem had beef, but I don't think it ever hits that point. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I do like in the Viridian Dynamics commercial for this episode, the one line that actually got me was we make all sorts of things like organic vegetables, chock full of antidepressants. Like it's it's so effortlessly just sounds like he's gonna say antioxidants. He's like chock full of antidepressants. You're like, I want that though. I want those vegetables. Give them to me.
Yeah, I like. They're like, we can even line. Oh yeah, you're gonna
yeah.
say
It's. I think we're probably thinking of the same one where it's like we can make peppers so hot that humans couldn't eat them, but we won't because humans eat them.
Because humans can't eat them. Yeah, that was my favorite line from it. Yeah, and this Viridian Dynamics commercial, as far as I could tell, there was no like thematic resonance with the episode, just that it was about food, and this episode is about food.
Yes,
as opposed to the first one where maybe there was more going on there. But it was pretty funny. I took issue in this one. I think it's kind of related to me taking issue with the whole like, her mom left to save the world. Like, it's this weird moment in 2009 where people are making fun of people who are trying to be vegan or who are trying to be carbon neutral or, things like that.
Yeah.
It's like that's supposed to be funny in 2009 and even today as well, but I think that's getting a lot more tired. But it was just, I took issue with the fact that they were treating this idea of creating artificial meat as like so gross, because I think that's a good thing.
We don't want to keep slaughtering cows. We're trying to get past that. It's terrible for the environment, and it's morally kind of fucked up that we're like butchering animals, right?
Yeah, like it's oddly for Viridian Dynamics a good project for them to be working on, that they're making fake meat. And like maybe it seems gross, but they successfully make a beef substitute at the end of the episode, which is pretty cool and like objectively a good thing, even though they end up saying like, oh, it's way too expensive to go to market or whatever.
Which is a real problem with beef
right.
substitutes, actually. Yeah.
Right.
We're not making beef blobs that I know of today, but like definitely the Beyond Meat like brand of vegan like burgers and stuff is wildly popular and one of like Whole Foods' top selling items. But it definitely still has that people have that view of like, ew, gross, like vegan food is fake food kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Just ignorance, honestly.
Yeah, and Linda, like when she walks into the room and she's like, "Ooh, gross! We're making a fake cow meat or whatever." I think that because Linda's supposed to be this sort of
voice of reason,
like audience surrogate person. So it seems like that must have been the zeitgeist at the time in 2009 of like, ew, fake meat, gross.
I loved her moment in that scene where she's like, "Oh, this is so gross," and everyone looks at her and she's like, "Oh, we're doing this. No, it's not gross because it's fine. We're doing it."
Yeah, that's funny.
Veronica hates small talk. I love this scene a lot. They're talking about how they made what is it? It's like cool mac and cheese or like awesome mac and cheese, but the problem is it makes people blind, and it also can be like explosive. And then Ted's like, "What if it's not mac and cheese?" And she's like, "It has to be. We already made a box for it." And he's trying to make small talk with her and keeps being like, "What we're having right now is small talk," and she's like, "Oh, that's what this is." And then he compliments her, and she's like, "Oh, I like this. I like this part."
Yeah, are they trying to do like a love triangle thing with her and Ted and Linda?
Oh, I hope not.
Happening?
Oh, yuck.
Well, because she keeps commenting on, is it this episode where she goes and talks to Linda?
Yeah, I believe so, yes.
Yeah, and then she's like, oh, Linda, she doesn't know Linda's last name. And then she's like, Ted, I don't want you sleeping with Linda or whatever. So I think they're trying to do a whole thing there.
Yeah, I imagine that they are. I don't know how like deep that's gonna go, but definitely like Veronica is sort of falling for Ted. It's weird. Anyways, yeah. So they're talking about small talk, which I thought was very funny. And she's like, please stop talking. I feel like I just wasted my whole day. And it's like, there are moments where this show does accurately portray office life. I think even like Linda's little small acts of rebellion is a common thing in workplaces, and hating small talk. I mean, don't get to do small talk anymore, because in my office there's like 2 people in the whole office, and there's not like random guy from other department in the break room just hanging out. It doesn't work like that right now. But so I've never really experienced this like boring small talk that people talk and discuss. But yeah, the other hashtag relatable thing is Linda's act of rebellion this episode is that later she's still stealing creamer, but when Ted is like, you have to stop stealing creamer, like people keep asking about it, her new thing is to keep hitting the automatic paper towel dispenser until it just like spits out all the paper towels.
Yeah.
And they do in fact never give enough. This is absolutely an accurate thing. Because they give you like 1 square's worth, but 1 square, like that shit melts and dissolves in like a millisecond. And then you're like, well, my hands are still wet. Should I have used less water? Like, I don't know how I could have done this better.
Yeah, but also that's another thing where it's like, sure, that's a corporation saving money thing. It's also like an environmental thing to conserve and not waste a ton of paper towels. So
yes,
that also makes that moment at the end where she's just like blatantly wasting a ton of paper towels, like not quite that triumphant
right.
for me anyway when I watch that.
Yeah, I mean, because realistically, especially for that one, it's like, well, who are you bothering? You're not like gonna fuck up Veronica's day. You're gonna mess up like the custodian's day, who has to reload that like every evening now.
Right, true.
And he doesn't deserve that. So it's just like,
yeah,
who are you rebelling against? It's the same as like, you know, you go to retail and you're like, I'm gonna not like wait in line in this automatic checkout or whatever, and it's like, cool, the guy who gets paid $10 an hour loses a customer sale. Like, he doesn't care. You're not like ruining his life or the company's life.
Yeah. Have you ever done anything like stealing the creamer or anything, like little acts of rebellion like that?
I saw you wrote that in the notes, and I tried thinking about it early, but I feel like the closest thing I have is, you know, if there's like a lunch spread or like a dessert spread, I will grab a little bit extra. But there's always the anxiety there of like, is someone going to see me taking too many desserts?
Yeah.
Definitely the most common one, and I think one that people should actually try to do in their workplace, is take long breaks and take bathroom breaks on the clock. There's nothing wrong with that. Don't let anyone tell you that you can't take bathroom, unless you work for a company like Amazon that won't let you take bathroom breaks. Getting paid to sit in the bathroom is praxis, if you ask me.
Yeah,
that's my biggest one. I'll do like 15-20 minutes in the bathroom and then come back and then take my 30-minute break sometimes.
Yeah.
Have you?
Well, I've done that before when I had like a data entry job.
Yeah.
Years and years ago. I did one. There's one job where I was doing like archival research for this postdoc fellow guy, and I had the whole summer to do it, which is way too much time. So I just watched a ton of TV and listened to a bunch of podcasts and did it, you know, like less work than I should have.
Exactly.
And then I've like, from schools that I've worked at, I've like, you know, taken some Post-its or, you know, papers or printed things for myself at the school printer, you know, stuff like that.
I mean, so I think the thing is, because I'm actually thinking about like other friends of mine. I'm obviously not going to call anyone out, but one of my friends who left a workplace on really bad terms still uses their water bottles that they gave him. Like, he took water bottles, he took food at every opportunity from the break room. Like, definitely did this exact Linda thing of like, take what you can, because they're not going to actually lose anything, and I can stand to gain something.
Yeah.
Anyone who says that you shouldn't do little stuff like that, like, I mean, Ted is mostly saying it because it's like, it's a pain to replace the creamer because people are going to find you out. You might get in trouble. But anyone who tells you like, no, come on, like, you're just hurting more people than you're helping, can go away. I think it's fine.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't bother that many people in the long term.
Mm-hmm.
There's more Ted and Linda romance stuff here. But there is a very, very, very funny line that we both noted where, you know, I think Veronica comes in and says like, why is there never any creamer? He's like, ants. No. Ghosts. No. I don't know.
That's a great one.
So good. Veronica sprays Phil with water and then says maybe you urinate, because when he's screaming, he's like, "Why am I wet?" She's like, "You might have urinated yourself," and he's like, "In my face," and she's like, "Yeah." I don't know why.
There's a lot of like corporate gaslighting stuff going on in this episode, because there's also the whole thing about how so Phil's doing all his screaming, like he was frozen and unfrozen, and now he just screams. And Ted's voiceover says that the company's lawyers have some theories about what they think might have happened. And it's like, oh, maybe he had a football injury, and it shows him and Lem playing paper football.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, maybe I don't remember the other things, but they're all like totally not plausible. And
he's like, maybe it's because we froze him and then dropped him on his head mid-freeze.
Right. But there's that, and then there's the whole ceremony of like, you're a hero and here's your award. It's just all this sort of like mind game stuff that corporations play to keep people in line.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And
Dark,
Ted is
but
a part of
harmless.
that. Like he,
Yes.
you know, continuing on the point from the first episode about how his whole character is he's just this guy who's like a company man and he's totally affable and fine with it, but also he's a really charming leader who can get people to do what he wants them to do just because they like him. In this, he very quickly finds a solution to the company's problem of like, what if Phil sues us, by saying like, let's just make something up to make him feel good, which is like a super smarmy thing to do. But he passes it off to Phil as like, I just thought you should be honored, buddy, because I'm your friend. And also we as an audience like kind of are meant to believe that as the truth. But it works for everybody. Like, it's not this sort of pure thing. Ted isn't a pure nice guy. He's doing it because it's what's good for the company also.
He's fully complicit in this corporate gaslighting, yeah.
Yeah.
Because, like, you know, other people who are like, kind of mean to each other, Phil and Lem, that hilarious montage where they're like, yeah, they really are, like, the best scientists. And, like, Lem gets Phil to, like, look into a microscope and, like, blacks out his eyes. And then they're like, let's test this pepper spray. Let me spray it in your eyes. He's like, ow, good job. And then, you know, they're, like, dancing at the Christmas party. Like, they tease each other, but in a way that doesn't feel vile or unfair. It's just, like, harmless, friendly tease. Like, boyfriends teasing each other kind of thing. People who are dating and madly in love. What? Who said that? But yeah, so Phil gets this imaginary Trailblazer of the Year award for being a hero, and you know, Lem is like super jealous. I think at one point, once she decides that that's what's going to happen, Veronica is in a room with him in a crowd, and he does the yell, and she's like, "That is the sound of courage, ladies and gentlemen. It's like an eagle screech, and I can't hear it enough." And then she does the very boss thing of like, "And neither can any of you. You guys need to like this."
Yeah, I wasn't crazy about that scream thing.
It's a little like hashtag random. It's a little like 2009 wacky. Like, oh, it's so weird that he yells.
It's one of those things where it's like, whenever it happens, you just turn the volume down on your TV and look around. Like, did my roommate hear the sound of screaming?
Yeah,
it takes me out of the show, and it's a whole thing. But
I think they're gonna drop it from here. I really hope so.
I hope they never do it again. Yeah.
Yeah. But usually the hardest laugh of the episode for me. Well, actually, yeah. There's the like Phil accepting the speech. Where, what does he say? What's the line about the cold or something? Or the cryo?
His first line is cryonics. The first syllable is cry, so how great can it be? Am I right?
We cut to Ted. He's like, yeah, that was a good line.
Such a good joke.
But no, my hardest laugh of the whole episode, by far, is he's talking to Lem later and talking about how much people like him now. And he's like, Julie in Employee Services asked for my autograph. That's right. Julie with the breasts in front.
Yeah.
What? I don't even know. I don't even need to think about what that means. Like,
because it's clear that he's like trying to do this sort of macho gotcha thing to Lem, but he's just not good at it. So the sentence is getting away from him, and he knows that he meant to say like Julie with like the big boobs or whatever, but he's like, with those breasts in front. Yeah. I love that you mentioning that joke reminded me of a joke from the first episode that I didn't point out. But what appreciate about the show is it knows when to cut away to things,
Right.
because it'll say stuff, and then if it's like, you need to see this, we'll cut away. But sometimes there are certain things, like those kind of Office inside jokes, that are just way funnier when you don't see what they're talking about.
Right.
Like that wouldn't work if it's like Julie with the breasts in front, cut to Julie with the
Julie.
breasts in front, like asking for his autograph or whatever. That's not funny.
Yeah, I don't need to meet Julie.
Right, but it's funny that everybody knows who they're talking about when they talk about Julie. And then in the first episode, there's this great joke where Phil and Lem go to Linda's cubicle, and they're like, "Wow, you've got a nice cubicle. We've been in all of them except for Cindy." Like, oh man, oh, Cindy's awful,
She's
right?
like, I've been in there multiple times.
And everybody, we never see Cindy, we never see her cubicle, we have no idea, but it's just so funny that like it's this shared joke that everybody knows what everybody's talking about, and everybody's got that person in their office who's like, oh man, you don't want to go in their cubicle. So it's something that you get when you're watching the show. You don't need to see it.
Yeah.
But I don't know, it does a lot to kind of sell the idea that these folks work together and have worked together for a while, and that this office is like a lived in real space.
Totally. I like the setting and the way that they flesh it out, like off screen.
Yeah.
And we meet Jerome after this, who I thought was so funny, because he's the guy who went blind from the quote extra fun mac and cheese.
Mhm.
And then I think Ted and Linda come into his, like, it looks like an interrogation room. It's very fucked.
Yeah.
Because like this is someone's real job, dude. Is to like,
Yeah,
and it's
like
not one
testing
person's
things.
job.
Yeah.
But like testing food or testing things, I mean, like there's testing is huge in tech and like the tech industry, but like in the food industry, I imagine there is like a whole test kitchen where people make stuff and then other people have to eat it. So I'm sure someone's like, "Yep, I've tasted a million different fake meat products in my life." He still can't see green, which is hilarious. And then he eats the first attempt at Blobby, which is what they call it. But then he says, Ted later says, don't call it Blobby because it'll remind people of Chester the Carrot. And Phil's like, I miss him. And it's like, yeah, because you gave him a name. And he's like, what does it taste like? And he can't, does it taste like meat? No. Does it taste like food?
Yeah.
No. What does it taste like? Despair. And then he jumps in. Is it possible it just needs salt? God. Disgusting. And then they try to fix that stuff. Veronica continues to, or not Veronica. Linda keeps taking creamer. Veronica is dealing with a cyborg problem. This whole like moment goes by so quickly.
So good.
But it's so good. Yeah.
Oh man.
She's like dealing with a violent cyborg that doesn't know the difference between children and soldiers. Like doesn't have a moral compass yet, and they're trying to test it. That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's very dark.
Yeah.
I mean, in the first episode, we already know that they make military technology. That's a real thing that corporations will do. Veronica's jealous that she doesn't have the Trailblazer of the Year award, and he's like, you know that you made it up, right? And she's like, yeah, but I do want it.
Yeah.
Then we get more Phil and Lem being best friends, and they're fighting. Actually, we get it here that Phil he's talking to Veronica when she gets him to sign the paper, and she's like, "Oh, your stupid wife," and then she's like, "I'm sorry, I shouldn't be talking about your wife like that." It's like, that's okay. She doesn't like me talking about her.
Well, yeah. Veronica's like, I don't like it when you talk about her or whatever. Like she's really, really laying it on thick with the seduction.
Yes,
the scene is so funny because Portia de Rossi is like, she's playing this really, really hard line where she's like being seductive and clearly drawing Phil in, but she's also like pretty wooden at it. Like when she's like, "Ooh, I love saying my own name, Veronica," but she like does it in a sexy way, and so Phil like likes it, even though it's so odd that she's sexily saying her own name.
And then she like gets lost in that bit where she's like, just saying it.
She like actually likes it a little bit. Yeah.
I can do it better. Hold on. He's like, I don't think you can do it better. You really did it. She's like, thank you. And then they call him the Below Zero Hero, which is a cute little nickname he gets. But she gets him to sign away his ability to sue the company, which is fucked. And then he fights with Lem, and then we get a very cute relationship drama moment where he's like, Lem leaves, and he's like, fine, go. And then he pauses, and then Lem's gone. He's like, so he just goes? 10 years of being lab partners, and he just leaves. Like, what? Yeah. Very relatable. Every time I get in a fight with someone, I'm like, no, you were supposed to... No.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so they get split up, and then they threaten to make him work with Richie and Fuzzle, which is just fun to say. They're like, no, not Richie and Fuzzle, which I loved. And then one of the other highlight lines of the episode, where he's like, I don't know how to be I'm so bad at like being a good partner. How can I know so much about the bonds of chemicals, yet so little about the bonds of friendship?
Yeah. Just the whole Phil Lem plot is really, really charming and well done.
So funny.
They hit every single beat of it, and every step of the way it's hilarious. I think it's probably the strongest part of the episode, I would say.
Yes, this is the episode that showcases them. Even like when they do start working together and they make the better meat blob by like massaging it because they realize that cows actually move and run outside and stuff. And then they like try to get Jerome to try it, but he's so scared, and they like kind of violently, but not that violently, like chase him down.
Him to eat it. Yeah.
It's hilarious. And then just the button on this whole plot line is they're like, yay, we did it, and we're heroes. And then Ted's like, so the meat costs $10,000 a pound, and it's not going to market.
Yeah.
Which is hilarious.
Yeah.
He's putting creamers back, and then Linda's like, no, it defeats the point of my rebellion. He's like, I'll get you something to rebel. She's like, yeah, I need to like get rid of all this like hot energy, this rebellious energy. You want to help me with that? And he's like, yeah. And then she just does the paper towels thing while reading a book in the bathroom instead.
It almost felt like a dream sequence where she's like, what am I gonna do with all this tension? It's like, is Ted gonna wake up right now or something?
What the hell?
But I guess that was just real.
That's exactly why I'm like, this has to be like this satirical relationship. This isn't like I'm trying to set up a real romance.
Yeah, right.
She's like, it's not like voting, Ted. You can punch more than one ballot. And he's like, I don't want to be... He's so funny with this. He's like, I don't want to be the kind of guy that votes around.
Yeah. What a nerd.
And yeah, she ends the episode doing the paper towels thing. That's where we're at. It's a fun one. I think this one's just like, jokes a minute. It hits harder, but is less like dramatically satisfying maybe than the first one.
Yeah, I think it just... If you kind of shaved it down a little bit, you could have just had a long pilot.
A longer pilot.
Something.
Yeah,
because it really just continues and resolves some things that like weren't particularly resolved in the pilot episode.
Exactly.
Yeah,
but I'm excited to see them bring in Rose and also like flesh out the office environment more with that stuff. So
yeah, for sure.
That's what I got. John, do you have any other spare notes? You got any back? Can you spare a note for me, sir?
Let's see. Let me just skim my notes real quick. No, not really. I think we covered all of it. I'm just curious to see where they take Ted's character and what they do with Ted and Linda and all that stuff, but I guess we'll see what happens, right?
Yeah, indeedy. Oh god, I just looked at the summary for episode 4. Can you read the summaries for episodes 3 and 4 so we know what we're watching next week on Better Off Chats?
So these are the summaries coming from Hulu, which is where I'm watching the show, at least. I don't know if that's where you're watching it.
I am, yes.
As well. Episodes 3 and 4 we're covering next time. First, episode 3, through rose-colored hazmat suits. Ted reluctantly takes Rose to work. That'll be fun.
Shit.
And then episode 4, racial sensitivity. Viridian's new light sensor system touches off a racial controversy.
So that could be potentially very interesting. I mean, it's 2009, so really, who could say? But that's like a current thing in the news, right?
I'm very curious about that.
Like Zoom's virtual background still is really bad at detecting people with dark skin tones, anything lighter than white people, or darker than white people. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like that's literally in the news today, so that could be, depending on how they handle it, could be really funny and interesting. So
yeah, I'm super curious about both those episodes. Cool.
Well, it sounds like we can bring it to the plug zone then.
Yeah, let's do it. So, is it okay if I do it?
Yeah, please do it.
Okay. So, for those of you who are brand new to the show, welcome. I have a couple things to tell you about how you can get in contact with us. If you would like to email the show, you can do so at chatspod@gmail.com. If you'd like to join us over on Twitter, you can follow us at twitter.com/chatspod. You can also message us there. Message us or email us with your comments, your suggestions, your questions. We read all that stuff on the show. Pretty much everything that people send to us, we read on the show. So we highly encourage you to do that. Also, we have a pretty open door here at Chatz. So if you're someone who loves Better Off Ted and would love a chance to just come on the show and watch an episode with us and talk about it with us, and be on an episode, we love that, and we highly encourage people to do that. So please reach out if you're at all interested in doing that with us. And we're certainly going to be reaching out to people who've been on the show before or to friends of ours. So you might hear, a bunch of guests down the road on episodes of Better Off Ted talking about their work experiences and if the show reflects it accurately or what. Mm-hmm. You can also join our listeners over at reddit.com/r/chatspod, where currently they are listening to old seasons of Chatz, a television podcast, as well as currently listening to the new seasons. So if you'd like to get into discussions with other listeners about Better Off Ted, about other shows that we've done, you can do so there. I believe, at least for this episode, also we've made a post on the Better Off Ted subreddit, which we might do for future episodes if they're okay with that over there. We'll see how that turns out.
Get the discussion going.
Yeah. So that's that. If you'd like to support the show, you can do so on Patreon at patreon.com/chatspod. And you can support the show at a number of different levels. You can do so at $1 a month, where you'll get access to some old movie commentaries that we did, as well as my current solo coverage of the X-Files, called the Chatz Files. If you back us at $3 a month, that's where you really get the sweetest deal, I would say. You get access to 3 brand new bonus episodes per month, which could be movie commentaries, they could be us piloting shows, or it could be us just kind of hanging out and doing something else. And then at $5 a month, you're basically doing that because you just like us and you want to give us a couple extra dollars. And there's some old episodes way back in the Patreon backlogs that I think are still only for $5 a month people. So that's how you get access to like everything by doing that. So that's the Patreon. We've got, what is this? When does this come out? This comes out in beginning of October. So we just released a movie commentary of the Warcraft movie. And then also coming out on the Patreon next week, we're going to be piloting some anime shows with a good friend of ours named Jim, who doesn't like anime. We're trying to get him into it. After that, there's a nights where we hang out, and then we'll end the month of October with some kind of a spooky movie commentary, and we'll see what people vote on for that. So yeah, that's Patreon. That's supporting the show.
Yeah. Before we move on to our final segment, this is the last podcast that'll come out before Angela Muscat Day, which is October 10th, folks. So if you've been listening to Chatz for a while, I'm sure you're familiar. But one of the best our favorite characters and the best actors on the TV show The Prisoner, which we covered months ago on Chatz, is the late and great Angela Muscat, who's an iconic actor who didn't really get enough credit for kind of breaking the roles that were given to him and being just a very engaging and fun guy to watch in movies. This stuff like back in the 60s and 70s, but he's really talented, and we just wanted to shout him out on the day that is designated as Angela Muscat Day, which again is October 10th. So shout outs to the homie Angela Muscat. Cool. Well, Magellan, our final segment here on Chatz is called Chatsums, where instead of our personal plugs, because we don't really use Twitter that much, it's kind of a hellscape, is we do Chatsums, little snackums, little bite-sized things for you to do, enjoy, watch, consume.
Named in honor of the Vlasic Snackum, the tiny little pickles.
Small
These are
pickles.
tiny little pickles of content that you can snack on between now and next week, if you have some free time besides watching Better Off Ted.
I should get an MP3 of someone biting into a pickle for the Chatsum segment. But Magellan, what's Chatsum for this week?
I've got 2 Chatsums for you, my friend. The first So I was hanging out with said friend Jim on on like Facebook video call, I guess, last night, and we were trying to figure out a movie to watch, and it was the whole thing of like, oh, this, well, I'm not in the mood for this, what about this, what about that. We eventually settled on like we want to watch a martial arts movie, but then there weren't really ones on Netflix that we felt like watching. We tried to watch the bad Netflix sequel to Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and it was bad and weird. And then I was like, well, I this week talked to somebody at work about this one show from like 2003 or something that's martial arts related. It's called Fight Quest. And if you've seen Human Weapon, I think it's a similar concept, but I think I've only seen Fight Quest, where basically it's these two guys who are like MMA guys, and they go to different parts of the world where they learn a martial art from experts in that martial art, and then they spar at the end of the week of training with someone who, has had several years of training in that particular martial art. And it's just a cool, fun premise for a show. I was learning that the producers were kind of like putting those two guys at risk a lot and not really taking good care of their bodies. Oh. So there is some stuff about that that's kind of shitty, but by and large, it seems like those two mixed martial arts guys are like happy with the experience, or like having done the show, just barring those things. So I guess just that's kind of a disclaimer, but it's a really fun show. It's on Discovery Channel. It's like got that vibe of like Discovery Channel style.
Easily bingeable, just
super bingeable, like turn it on and do your knitting or do your laundry or whatever.
Oh, I want to do my knitting.
When Mythbusters is on, kind of thing.
Yes.
So yeah, Fight Quest. And
did
then
you know they did a Mythbusters Junior recently?
Mythbusters Junior?
Not recently. I don't know.
Like
how
a
long
little
ago.
kid had the mustache?
No, what I remember was it was Adam and like a bunch of teens. And the one that I watched that somebody showed me was like they tried to make a giant-sized version of like a bug trap. You know how they have like the sticky floor bug traps? And they made it, like they literally just got like vats of bug trap goo and tried running over it to see if they could get over it, and they could not. Spoiler alert. It's on YouTube. It's awesome. Mythbusters Junior. It's my piggyback Chatz, but go on.
And then the other Chatsum that I have is a documentary. So if folks were just with us for our Chatz Adams season, you know that my past couple Chatsums have been related to constructed languages, which is the rabbit hole that I'm down right now. Mm-hmm. And I watched this documentary called Conlanging, the Art of Crafting Tongues, I think is the subtitle. I know that the title is Conlanging. And it's the way that the director of the documentary sets it up is it's sort of like a visual museum exhibit of different constructed languages. So there's not like a single narrative through line. It's more just these vignettes of like, and here's a different constructed language, and here's somebody who like just made the language for themselves and they don't talk to anybody else in it, and like here's a little bit about Klingon and things like that. So if you're interested in constructed languages at all, it's an hour and a half. It's quick and it exposes you. It's a good kind of like primer on a lot of different well-known constructed languages, and I thought it was pretty cool. So Conlanging, I believe it's called Conlanging, the Art of Crafting Tongues. Ooh. Yeah,
I'm interested.
Those are my Chatsums.
Very exciting. So I have one Chatsum. If people have been listening to Chatz for a while, way back in Chatsalon 5, episode 57, I recommended a YouTube channel called Get in the Robot, which was a really cool YouTube channel focusing on anime criticism, coming from a very diverse perspective of voices and personalities. That channel got shut down, unfortunately, but the people who made Get in the Robot have come back this week, the week that we're recording this at least, via Patreon, and their new channel is called Beyond the Bot, which is really great. And I feel like it's worth re-recommending because they're still in that early push of trying to get their name out there, getting it back out there now that they're fully independent. I just love these guys, these folks' voices. I think they are talking about the stuff in anime that I'm really interested in. They have 2 videos on their channel right now, so you can kind of feel cool about being in on the ground floor. One is Why Anime is for Black People, which I love. That this is kind of a follow-up to one of their hosts' video back on the previous channel about how Dragon Ball Z appealed to young black kids in the 90s. And they have another video called Good Anime That You Can't Watch in Public, which is part of a series that I've never watched where one of the hosts kind of roasts himself by attempting to watch really problematic anime in public and talking about it. Again, really funny stuff. They have a podcast that's all available everywhere called the Bot Beyond the Botcast. I think it's like a tentative title. I just really recommend checking them out. Subscribe to their YouTube channel. They're really doing good stuff in that space, and I think people should check them out. It's Beyond the Bot. Well, Magellan, that I think is going to do it for this episode of Better Off Chats. Thank you as always, my dear friend, for being the rock to my hard place. I have a wonderful time talking to you every week. It's one of the highlights of my week. And thank you, dear listener, for listening to this episode of Better Off Chats. From the secret podcasting studio located directly beneath Verdian Dynamics corporate offices, good night.
No.
No.
You don't need to do all that.
All billionaires are policy failures.
Sure. Corporations are theft.
Using both of those. Thank you.